guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been forever since I've posted, but I was thinking why not come back and post about my labor and birth video, because so many people have been asking me how it went and what happened and my whole birth and labor and everything story. So I was thinking that I would come on here and tell you guys what happened from A to Z. Because so first thing that happened, it was 6 in the morning and I was in bed. My boyfriend just left for work and I was having stomach pains, like period cramps. So when that happened, I was just like, okay, so maybe it's just like normal period cramps, you know, my stomach just hurts. So I go back to bed. I wake up around 9 or 10 and they're getting a bit stronger, and I'm like, this is weird because I'm only 35 weeks and 6 days. I'm not even full term yet, or like I'm close, but like, you know, still far. So I'm just like, I don't think this is labor. Like, I don't think I'm gonna be giving birth, you know, because like I'm not far enough. And in that time, I was on bed rest because I was already open 2 centimeters and dilated 70%. So I didn't really think anything of it. And in that time, I was like, okay, so I'm probably just like having stomach pains, you know? So I just, after that, I think it's around 11 or 12, I text my mom and I'm like, I'm having really bad stomach pains. And I open my phone and I start going on this app called Contractions. And I time my contractions and they were every 8, 7, 6 minutes. So I text my mom, I'm like, what do I do? And she's like, we'll call maternity. So I call in maternity and I asked them, I'm like, my contractions are this time apart. What should I do? They're like, go take a bath, 15 minutes. If when you get out of the bath, you still have contractions, keep timing them. If they're still 8 minutes to 7 minutes apart, get to the hospital. So I'm like, okay, cool. So when that happens, baby sneezing. So when that happens, I go in the bath and 15 minutes later, the contractions are still going on. I come out of the bath and I go back in my room, I start timing them again, and they're still 8 minutes apart. So I'm like, nope, not doing this. I am not giving birth in my room. So I call my friend up and I'm like, hey, you want to bring me to the hospital? I think I'm going in labor. And she's like, yeah, I'll be right there. So she comes and picks me up, and I'm still having contractions in the car, but they're getting closer. They're like 5 minutes apart, 4 minutes apart, 3 minutes apart. So I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to give birth right in the car, you know? So we get to the hospital and I'm fine. I didn't give birth in the car. We get to the hospital and there's a wheelchair waiting for me, and I'm like, I'm not like, I can walk, you know? And then they're like, oh, but it's okay, just like sit down and stuff. So I'm like, okay. So I sit down in the wheelchair and I go up to maternity. I get to maternity, like everybody, like every other hospital, they ask if you have COVID symptoms. I'm like, no, I don't have any. They're like, okay. So I walk in and then they bring me to the triage room. And inside the triage room, there's like, I think 5 other girls in the triage room, and all of them are like pregnant as hell. And I'm just here with my like, I still have a big belly, but I come in with my 35 weeks and 6 days, and then everybody's like 40 weeks in there almost. So I just sit down on the bed, and then the nurse comes in and she asks me what's going on and everything. So they start putting the like, I don't know how you call those, but they put stuff on your stomach, like these little machines to time your contractions and to see like how strong they are and everything. So my contractions were going kind of really high. So they tell me, okay, well, we're gonna keep you for observation a bit. In that time, it was 12. On Thursday, May 28th. Yeah, May 28th on Thursday. So I just stayed there for 6 hours, I think. It was 6 p.m. when the doctor came back and saw me, because they kept coming and seeing me every 2-3 hours to see if I dilated, and I was still at 2. So they ended up coming back, but my contractions never stopped. So that's what the thing is. They didn't want me to leave just because of that aspect. So when the doctor comes back at 6, she checks my cervix to see if I dilated again, and instead of 2, I was at 3. So she's like, okay, we're gonna admit you now after 6 hours. So they plug this little thing in my vein, which, by the way, is worse than giving birth. Like, no joke, my birth was like amazing because I didn't feel anything. But this thing they plug in your vein, it's like a shot or something. It hurts because it is really thick. I don't want to scare any moms who are giving birth soon, but it is bad. Like, I hate it. Really hate it. After they do that, they bring me to the new room, and I call my boyfriend. I'm like, hey, I am going into labor, so get to the hospital like right now. So he's freaking out. He's like, okay, gets in the shower, gets all the baby stuff, gets all our stuff, comes to the hospital, and I'm in the room and I'm just chilling. So he comes in, and then another couple hours pass, more hours. It's the next day. I'm still having contractions. So the doctor comes in, she's like, well, we don't want you giving birth. So they gave me a kind of drug, which I forgot what it's called, but they give me this kind of drug, and it slows down my contractions. They're less hard, hard. They hurt less, and they start stopping. So my contractions stopped for 2 hours, and right when the drug wore off, they started back up again. So they're like, okay, well, we'll try it again because it seemed to help. So they stopped my contractions again with the drug. 2 hours passed, they came back again. So they're like, okay, so this isn't working. This baby want to come out. So, but they don't give up. They're like, we don't want him coming out now. It's too early. Like, he'll still be okay, but it's still too early. So then at this time, I was 35 weeks and 5 days. This was on Friday. So after that on Friday, I think it's like 12, they're like, okay, so we don't think you're gonna give birth anytime soon. You're not dilated enough. You're still at 3, because they kept checking my cervix and it wasn't dilating, which is why they wanted to send me back home, because I wasn't dilating. So like, we'll try something else and then send you home if it works. So they said we're gonna try morphine. Morphine is supposed to work for 4 hours. So, and the thing is, if they give you morphine and you give birth in those 4 hours, it might slow the baby's heart down, which is why I wasn't like really wanting to, but like my contractions were so painful that I was like, yo, just drug me. I can't. I really needed that. They ended up giving me the morphine, and it lasted maybe an hour or 2, and my contractions slowed down, and then they stopped. And then I think 3 hours later, they started back up again, and they're like, what? Like, they were so confused because I wasn't dilating. My contractions weren't hard enough to make me dilate, but they still kept going, you know, so they're like, we can't send you home because it's doing that, but we'll try and stop them again. So they gave me another dose of morphine. I passed right out for that one because like it was so much like medicine in my veins that I was like, nope. So I ended up going to bed for I think 5 hours, 6 hours. I woke up, no contractions. So they're thinking of sending me back home. They're like, okay, we're gonna, you know, send you back home and everything. And I'm like, okay, so everything, you know, we're getting ready and stuff, and then out of nowhere, I'm lying down. I think it's 8 at night on Friday. I look at my boyfriend, I'm like, I just felt something in my stomach, like somebody punched my uterus. Like, I was like, what is going on? And then out of nowhere, my waters break and they just gush out, and I'm like, no way. So I start crying because I'm realizing I'm gonna have to give birth, because they were talking to me about going back home. So I'm like, oh, okay, it's enough time to prepare. But no, my water broke. So you know what? Your water breaks, you gotta give birth. So I am freaking out, and I'm like, no, I am not ready for this. I am not ready. I have to. So I call my stepmom, which is my dad's girlfriend and my baby's godmother. And I call her, and I'm like, I can't do this. I don't want to give birth. What do? I can't do this. And she's like, calm down. You can do this. You have to do this. I was like, is it too late? She's like, it is too late. And then I'm freaking out. But anyways, she ended up like helping me and stuff, and I ended up hanging up. And then they look at me, they're like, do you want the epidural? And I'm like, I just want to see first how the contractions feel, because I was able to stand the other ones before my water broke. So I just wanted to see first to make sure if they didn't hurt as much that I wouldn't take it. I wait maybe 2 minutes, and I start bawling, because the contractions when your water break are painful. They are the worst. So that being said, I was like, no, I am getting the epidural. They called the guy, and the guy's like, oh, well, I'm in surgery right now, so I can't really come now, because it's like an anesthetic guy or a doctor or a thing. I don't know how you call that, but anyways, an anesthetic guy or whatever. So he's like, I'll come as soon as I can. So I'm like, crap, I'm scared to give birth during that time, you know, because I can't push this baby out natural. Like, no, I don't want to feel that, you know. So I'm here waiting for the anesthetic. Later, he calls, it says I'm coming. So I'm like, yay. But at the same time, I'm like, because, you know, I don't want to get this big needle in my back. Like, I'm freaking out because I'm scared of needles. I told you guys this one in my hand was the worst. It really was, because I didn't, like, you guys will see. So anyways, the guy comes in and he's explaining this and, like, the stuff that could happen and then the side effects and a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. Just stab me in the back, man. I can't. The contractions hurt way too much. So he's like, okay. So my boyfriend comes and sits on the bed in front of me and I lie down on him because, you know, it's scary. The guy's like, okay, so I'm going to like put the first needle in to freeze your back before putting the actual epidural. I didn't know that they froze your back before the epidural, so I was happy. I'm like, oh, cool. So he stabs me, but I go, and I flinch. I'm like, oh my God. And then the guy's like, it's okay, it's not the epidural, so it's okay if you move, you know. Good. Because I was scared. I'm like, I don't want to be paralyzed, you know. So he ends up freezing my back, and then I tell him, I'm like, just put it in the epidural. Don't tell me when you put it in. Just do it so I don't know, you know? So he's just like, okay, sounds good. So he puts it in, and my back, when I tell you it was on fire, it was on fire. Like, I thought I was burning. Like, it just went all in my back, and it hurt so much. Well, I mean, it didn't hurt. It was just a weird feeling. Like, I wasn't crying. I wasn't, like, you know, no. Like, I said it hurts, but it doesn't hurt. It's like, it feels weird, you know, the feeling that it gives you, it's just weird. But I'd get the epidural 50 more times if I had to, because I didn't want to feel nothing. So, and then after, when he was done, they lied me back down in the bed because I didn't feel my legs. So they lied me back down, and then they started putting the actual epidural medicine into my back. Once they put the actual medicine in, it was freezing, but I loved the feeling. I was like, wow, put more, you know, I loved it. And the thing is, they're not supposed to put like a certain amount of epidural medicine in your back, but I kept telling them to put more because I felt my contractions and they hurt, but I just really didn't want to feel him coming out, so I just kept telling them to put more and put more and put more. And then I think I fell asleep for an hour because like the epidural medicine's like really strong and it makes you really tired, so I think I went to bed for an hour. And then I wake up and they come and check my cervix again. They're like, okay, well, you're 10 centimeters now, so it's time to start pushing. And I'm like, oh, damn, okay, this is really happening. But I didn't feel anything, so they did the ice test on me just to see if I could feel my legs and stuff. So they put an ice cube on your leg and close to your private part and everything, and they start putting it on you, and they're like, can you feel the cold? And I'm like, no. So that means the epidural worked. So then after that, they tell me to start pushing. So I'm just like, okay, it's really going down. I'm giving birth today. I pushed for an hour and 30 minutes, which might not seem that long, but it really is that long. Like, I was pushing so hard, I almost passed out. And then they tell me, well, your baby's facing down, and you can't give birth to a baby facing down. So they tried turning him, so they're shoving their hands and trying to turn him, and I'm like, okay, what are you doing? I couldn't feel it, but I could feel their hands pain, but it didn't hurt. So they're turning his head, and he won't turn, so his head was sideways when he came out. But they're like, okay, so he doesn't want to come out. I'm pushing like a crazy maniac. They're like, well, we're gonna need the forceps. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want forceps. And then they're like, well, or else I could get an emergency C-section if he doesn't come out in the next couple minutes. And I'm like, no, I am not getting that, because his heart rate was going down. So I'm like, you know? So they're like, push one last time, and if he doesn't come out, we'll use forceps. I pushed the biggest push I have ever pushed, and he came out. And I was like, oh my God, but I didn't feel him come out, so I'm still pushing, and they're like, you can stop pushing now, he's out. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I looked down, and they got my little baby on me. I was bawling my eyes out. Then you got my boyfriend beside me, who's just staring. He's like, oh my God, and he's so happy. Like, we're both so happy. I was crying my eyes out. And they're like, good job, Mama, you got this, you did this. And they're like, I wish I had all my patients like you. You did such a good job. And I was like, thank you. And then I ended up, my placenta ended up falling right after. And when right when I was pushing, they told me I had a placenta eruption or something, like my placenta unstuck or something. So that could have been really dangerous. But since I was pushing and I gave birth, it was okay. So I pushed out. And then the neonatology people, that's the people who take care of the premature babies, were in the room, and they're like, okay, well, we need to take your baby in neo because we just want to make sure he's okay. So I'm like, okay. So I just fall back asleep. Stop the video because I have a 15-minute limit for some reason. But if you guys want me to post what happened during the hospital for a month, leave a comment down below.